Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio Channel. Tonight we step into a year that talks endlessly about liberty, while denying you even the ownership of your own footsteps. You hear speeches about rights floating through taverns and meeting houses, yet your own life can still be bought, ordered, inspected, and controlled by someone who would call this a free country with a perfectly straight face. It is a strange, bitter thing to live inside a revolution that praises independence while demanding your obedience from dawn until dark. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you're here, tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, and let your breathing grow slow as you enter the uneasy world of Black America in 1780, where survival depends less on justice than on reading danger early. Lowering your eyes at the right moment, and carrying whole storms of thought behind a calm and careful face, you wake before the sun because the day rarely belongs to you. The darkness inside the room feels close and stale, thick with the smell of rough boards, old ash, damp cloth, and sleeping bodies. Somewhere nearby, a baby stirs. Someone coughs into the cold. You listen for the first useful sound. Perhaps a rooster, perhaps a bell, perhaps footsteps crossing a yard. In 1780, sound tells you what kind of morning is coming. A hurried tread means orders. A slammed door means temper. A wagon wheel before dawn means visitors, and visitors can mean inspection, gossip, sale, or trouble disguised as courtesy. Outside, the air can cut your skin in winter or hang heavy and wet in summer. In the northern states, icy wind slips through every gap in the wall and makes your fingers ache before work even begins. In the Chesapeake and the Carolinas, heat rises fast, carrying the smell of mud, tobacco, sweat, marsh water, and animal pens. The land changes from colony to colony, but one truth stays stubbornly the same. Your body is expected to answer other people's needs immediately. That expectation shapes every hour. If you are enslaved, the law may treat you as property, though the exact rules shift from place to place. If you are free, the danger does not vanish, it simply changes clothes. You may need papers to prove your status. You may face curfews, harassment, seizure, or the constant suspicion that your freedom is temporary, borrowed, or somehow offensive. Historians still argue over how much wartime turmoil loosened old routines for black people in certain regions. Yet uncertainty itself is part of the story. Disorder can create openings, but it also creates fresh reasons for white authorities to tighten control. You move carefully because even ordinary acts can be read as insolence. Looking too directly at a white person may be called boldness. Speaking too softly may be called sulking. Speaking too clearly may sound clever, and cleverness can be treated as a threat. So you learn the exhausting skill of measuring yourself from the outside. You hear your own voice as others might judge it. You feel your shoulders and hands and mouth as if each must be supervised. Obedience is not just behaviour. It becomes theatre. That theatre has a cost. You smile when the joke is not funny. You stand still when your legs want to shift. You let an insult pass through the air without catching fire inside your chest. At least not where anyone can see it. Sometimes survival means wearing calm like a borrowed coat that never quite fits. Sometimes it means thanking a person whose power over you is obvious and cruel. It is not weakness. It is calculation. A quiet face can save skin, family, food, and time. Around you, the wider world hums with revolutionary language. Men discuss parliament, tyranny, taxation, representation. They use large words with great seriousness, often while being served by black hands. You might carry wood into a room where liberty is praised over supper. You might pour cider while someone declares that no man should live under arbitrary power. There is a sour kind of comedy in this. Gentle, sleepy sarcasm is almost the only safe kind. You could laugh, if laughing were wise. Instead, you memorize the scene. Candlelight on silver, boots drying by the hearth, the smell of roasted meat. Grand ideas hanging above a table built by labourers who may never taste freedom themselves. Some black Americans hear these arguments and recognise a dangerous possibility. If white colonists insist that natural rights belong to all people, then perhaps those words can be turned back upon them. In some places, petitions for freedom appear. In Massachusetts, enslaved people drew upon revolutionary ideals to challenge bondage. Courts and local politics did not suddenly become fair, of course. Life did not transform overnight into justice and tea cakes. Still, the language of the age gave some people a sharper tool for making claims. Whether those claims were heard depended on region, timing, allies, and luck. Luck matters too much in 1780. A kinder owner can mean fewer beatings. Though kindness under slavery remains a warped and limited thing, a distant war can disrupt a plantation and produce confusion that helps someone flee. A change in household finances can shatter a family in a week. A widow's debt, a failed crop, a son inheriting property, a rumour of escape, a neighbour's accusation, all can rearrange your life without warning. Stability is thin. You learn not to trust it fully. Meals reflect that uncertainty. Food may be coarse, repetitive, and never quite enough. Cornmeal, salted fish, scraps of pork, beans, cabbage, molasses when available, perhaps rice in the low country, perhaps herring in northern towns. The smell of boiling grain and smoke clings to your clothes. Hunger teaches its own discipline. You eat when food is offered because refusal is impossible luxury. You save a crust if you can. You notice who is ill, who is growing, who is exhausted. In some communities, people hunt fish or garden in whatever spare moments they can steal, building tiny pockets of nourishment within a system designed to drain them. Clothing is practical, rough, and often inadequate. Linen shirts chafe, wool scratches, shoes wear thin. In winter, numb toes become familiar companions. In summer, cloth sticks to your back and salt dries on your skin. Touch is everywhere in this world. Rope burns the palm. Splinters rise from tool handles. Iron pots heat the air around them. Mud grips at ankles. The texture of 1780 is hard, fibrous, and honest in all the least comforting ways. And yet life is not made only of suffering. That would be too simple. And real history rarely grants simplicity. You hear jokes traded quietly in workyards. You catch songs carried low and steady under breath. You see someone straighten a child's collar with tenderness that no law can fully erase. You smell bread at the edge of burning. You feel the relief of sitting for 1 minute after hours on your feet. You watch moonlight on water and know beauty has not asked anyone's permission to exist. These moments do not cancel injustice. They simply prove that human feeling survives inside it. Black communities in 1780 are far from uniform. An enslaved dock worker in Charleston lives differently from a free black sailor in Newport. A woman labouring in a Virginia kitchen experiences control differently from a man cutting timber in the backcountry. Urban areas can offer movement, hired out labour, crowded streets, and access to news. Rural plantations can mean harsher isolation, deeper surveillance, and larger enslaved populations. Some people are African-born and carry languages, beliefs, and memories from specific regions of West or Central Africa. Others are American-born and know this land, however cruelly, as home. Many live in a blend of inherited African traditions and local adaptation. One quirky detail from the era slips through the record with surprising force. In several regions, advertisements for runaway enslaved people describe not only scars, skills, and clothing, but also personality, posture, and speech patterns with eerie precision. A person might be listed as smiling often, speaking good English, playing a fiddle, limping slightly, or pretending to be free, even in documents meant to recapture them. Individuality pushes through. That is the strange thing about oppressive records. They try to reduce a human being to property, yet they often reveal a vivid person in spite of themselves. Religion moves through daily life in complicated ways. Some white Christians speak earnestly about salvation while defending slavery with astonishing mental gymnastics. Others begin to question the institution more openly. Among Black Americans, Christian ideas mix with older spiritual practices, local customs, and private interpretations. Formal worship may be segregated, supervised, or limited. Still, prayer can be whispered anywhere. a field edge, a loft, a shoreline, a cooking fire gone low. Faith may offer comfort, but it can also sharpen pain. Why would a just God permit such a world? People ask that in different words, in silence or song or stubborn endurance. Wartime makes everything more unstable. The American Revolution is not a clean story of heroes and villains from where you stand. It is a rolling disturbance. Armies move, prices rise, food becomes scarce. British proclamations promising freedom to some enslaved people who escape rebel masters spread both hope and danger. Not everyone can flee. Not everyone trusts the offer. Not everyone survives the attempt. But the possibility travels by whisper, by rumour, by a face seen missing at dawn. Scholars still debate how many black Americans viewed the conflict mainly as a political opening rather than an ideological struggle. Because survival usually comes first. Grand principles matter, but food, family, and immediate risk matter more. You become skilled at reading rooms. This is one of the great uncelebrated arts of survival. You can tell when a white household is tense before anyone speaks. A mistress banging pans a little harder, a master drinking earlier than usual, children unusually quiet, guests arriving dressed too formally, a ledger left open, horses saddled in haste. You read all this because consequences often reach you first. If money is short, you may be hired out or sold. If tempers rise, punishment comes faster. If politics turn sour, black movement may be restricted. The room speaks before the mouth does, and then there is the matter of names. Your name may be shortened, replaced, mocked, or ignored. Naming is power. Some enslaved people carry African names in memory, English names in public, and nicknames in community. That layering can hold pain and resistance at once. A name spoken softly among trusted people can feel like a small reclaimed territory. Not much, just enough to breathe. Children absorb all of this with heartbreaking speed. They learn when to be silent, when to move quickly, when to avoid certain doors, when to bow their heads, when to stay close to older relatives. Childhood exists, but it is narrowed. Play still happens, because children will always find a way to chase light into corners. Yet the world presses in early. A child can understand hierarchy long before understanding politics. A child knows who can strike, who can separate families, who must be obeyed instantly. Sleep comes easier to the powerful. Even so, knowledge circulates. News travels through kitchens, docks, market stalls, churchyards, sewing rooms, tavern thresholds, and wagon routes. Black Americans hear more than many white people imagine. They hear troop movements, crop failures, legal disputes, sermons, scandal, and rumour. Information is a form of shelter, knowing which road is watched, which official is cruel, which town has a free black household, which ship is hiring, which minister may help, which patrol drinks too much. All of that matters. You listen because listening can keep you alive. In the end, what life is really like for black Americans in 1780 cannot be told as one single condition. It is a field of pressures. It is fear mixed with skill. It is labour shaped by coercion. It is the daily discipline of appearing compliant while guarding an inner self from being flattened completely. The age calls itself enlightened. That sounds impressive by candlelight, but you know better, because your skin feels the draft through the wall. Your stomach knows the measure of hunger. Your ears know the weight of footsteps in the dark, and your whole life teaches the hardest lesson of the year. In 1780, survival often means obedience on the surface, watchfulness underneath, and the quiet refusal to let the world decide you're only what it says you are. Morning does not begin with choice, it begins with expectation, and expectation is louder than any bell. You rise into a day already assigned to someone else's plan, someone else's hunger, someone else's schedule. In 1780, time itself can feel owned. The sun comes up for everyone, but the hours do not belong equally to all who stand beneath it. You feel this most clearly in the body. Before you have fully shaken sleep from your limbs, your hands are already reaching for work. A broom handle, a hoe, a bucket, a kettle, a knife for chopping roots, a spindle, a hammer, a pail for water. Each tool seems to speak its own command. Move faster. Again. There is a pulse to the day, and it is not gentle. In many homes and plantations, black labour sets the whole machine in motion. Fires must be lit, animals fed, children washed, water carried, grain ground, rooms swept, wagons loaded, breakfast prepared, fields entered, nets repaired, cloth scrubbed, barrels rolled. Someone must do the first hard task so that everyone higher in the household can wake into comfort and call it ordinary. If you live in a port town, the day may begin with harbour noise. Ropes strain, masts knock in the wind, men shout over crates and barrels, gulls cry like impatient creditors, salt air mixes with tar, fish, wet wood, and the bitter tang of smoke from morning fires. Ships bring goods, people, rumour, disease, and possibility. On the docks, black workers may be enslaved, hired out, or free, sometimes standing within a few feet of one another while living very different legal lives. Even so, the work joins them in a common rhythm of lifting, balancing, hauling, and enduring. A dropped crate can bruise more than flesh. A careless word to the wrong overseer can cost wages or worse. If you're in the countryside, sound behaves differently. Dawn arrives through insects, lowing cattle, distant axes, and the soft drag of feet crossing packed earth. Mist hangs over fields in the early cool. Then the heat begins to rise, and with it the smell of manure, green stalks, fresh cut wood, and damp soil opening to the sun. The labour of the countryside is often repetitive in a way that changes your sense of time. Row after row, fence after fence, basket after basket. The eye searches for variety and finds only more of the same task waiting ahead. A person can spend whole seasons chasing the needs of tobacco, rice, indigo, wheat, or corn, while the crop receives more careful accounting than the worker. This is one of the cruelest truths of 1780. The clock that governs your day is not a neat little device on a mantle. It is the discipline of production. Even households without formal clocks still keep harsh time. The sun marks one part. The overseer's mood marks another. Weather decides the pace. Market days compress it. Harvest stretches it. Illness interrupts it only if illness becomes impossible to ignore. Otherwise, pain is simply folded into the schedule and carried along like another bundle. Women often bear a double burden that never politely introduces itself. Their work can move between field and household with barely a pause to breathe. A woman may rise before first light to prepare food, nurse a child, carry water, scrub linens, then labour outdoors, then return to cooking, mending, and tending the sick. Her hands smell of lye, herbs, smoke, old milk, iron, and sweat. Sometimes all in the same afternoon. The domestic sphere is often presented in gentle terms by people who never had to keep it running. There is nothing especially soft about lifting water, wringing cloth until knuckles sting, bending over kettles in summer heat, or sleeping lightly because someone may call for you at any hour. Men, too, are pushed into roles built from endurance. In fields, they clear, plough, plant, cut, and load. In towns, they smith, saw, cart, stable horses, stack cargo, or repair tools. Some are trained in skilled trades, and skill can bring a strange mix of value and danger. A talented carpenter, cooper, or blacksmith might gain a little mobility, a little bargaining space, perhaps even small earnings in rare cases. Yet skill also increases what others can extract from you. The more useful you are, the more closely your labour may be managed. A clever hand does not automatically become a freer one. Children enter this world of time early. Little ones fetch kindling, gather scraps, carry messages, mind younger siblings, chase animals from gardens, or stand ready to help. Their tasks may look small to an outsider, but the lesson beneath them is large. Be useful, be quick. Do not need too much. A child who learns the rhythm of command is being prepared for adult labour long before adulthood arrives. At the same time, children notice absurdities with devastating accuracy. They know who eats first. They know whose tiredness matters. They know that some people are praised for giving orders while others are scolded for moving one moment too slowly. Children can understand unfairness before they ever learn the word. There is a peculiar detail hidden in many records of the period. In some urban areas, church bells, market bells, and even drum signals helped organise public activity. But black labourers often experienced these sounds less as civic order and more as summons. A bell can call people to worship, trade, militia drill, or curfew. The same metal voice can announce entirely different meanings depending on your place in society. Historians continue to disagree about how strongly African ideas of communal time survived under slavery in mainland North America. Yet many scholars note that enslaved communities still created their own internal rhythms within imposed schedules. Night gatherings, whispered prayers, food sharing, caregiving, and private storytelling formed a parallel map of time beneath the official one. That hidden map matters because the formal day can be brutal. Imagine standing in a kitchen where heat from the fire presses against your face, while cold air slips under the door and chills your ankles. Fat spits in the pan, bread browns too fast. A child cries in the next room. Someone calls for more water. Someone else complains the coffee is weak. You're expected to answer all of it with speed and composure. Or imagine a field where your shirt sticks to your back and insects worry at your neck while an overseer measures progress not by effort but by output. The sun climbs. Your shoulders burn. Dirt settles in every crease of your skin. Noon offers little relief. Then the afternoon begins, which feels rude, honestly, because the morning was already enough for one lifetime. Enslaved people sometimes negotiated tiny spaces within these schedules. A few might tend personal garden plots at night or on rare free hours. Some hired out workers in cities could keep a portion of earnings after handing most over to an owner. Others traded goods, cooked for sale, mended clothing, or gathered herbs. These activities were not signs of a fair system. They were evidence of human ingenuity inside an unfair one. Every scrap of self-directed time had to be carved from fatigue. Rest was not freely given, it was stolen in spoonfuls. Free black Americans also lived under demanding clocks. Though their labour had different legal meaning, northern towns especially, many worked in unstable, low-paid, physically draining jobs. Washerwomen, sailors, domestics, labourers, cart drivers, and craftsmen had to satisfy employers while also managing rents, food, clothing, and the constant need to prove respectability in a suspicious society. Freedom without security can turn every hour into calculation. How much work can you find this week? Who will pay in coin rather than promises? Which street is safest after dusk? Whom can you trust to watch a child? It is still a life governed by urgency. You also learn the social clock of deference. There are moments when you must step aside, remove a hat, lower your eyes, answer quickly, stop speaking, or wait until spoken to. These gestures seem small to those who demand them. They are not small when performed dozens of times a day. Repetition gives them weight. The body remembers humiliation physically. A lowered gaze can tighten the neck. A forced stillness can harden the jaw. Silence itself takes effort when words are pressing against your teeth. Food breaks, when they come, rarely feel leisurely. A bowl is balanced on the knee. A crust is eaten standing. Hands move while chewing. The taste of salted meat or porridge may barely register because the body is already bracing for the next instruction. Still, there are sensory comforts that slip through. The steam from a pot on a cold day, the sweetness of roasted corn, the smell of onion hitting hot fat, the cool splash of water on wrists after a long hour by the fire. Even tiny reliefs become memorable when the day is ruled so tightly. The calendar carries its own burdens. Planting season, harvest, laundry day, baking day, market day, slaughtering time, militia movement, ship departure, court session, Sabbath. Each period brings specific labour and specific risks. During harvest, speed can be ruthless because crops must be brought in before weather turns. In port cities, incoming vessels can mean sudden surges of work unloading goods. In wartime, troop movement can disrupt every ordinary routine. Seizing supplies and stirring panic, there is rarely a calm, neutral season. Each part of the year simply changes the shape of demand. Night does not guarantee release. Fires must be banked, tools cleaned, clothes patched, children settled, the elderly comforted, a sick person watched. Some people collapse into sleep the moment their bodies touch rough bedding. Others lie awake, listening. Crickets outside, wind in the cracks, a horse shifting in the yard, footsteps that pause too long. Darkness changes the work, but it does not always end it. For many, the only truly personal thoughts of the day arrive when the room is quiet and no one is asking for anything more. And yet the human mind resists being reduced to a timetable. During labour, you may count silently, hum under your breath, repeat a prayer, remember a face, imagine a road, or notice the shape of a cloud just to prove that your attention still belongs partly to you. These are not dramatic rebellions. They are subtler than that. They are ways of remaining inwardly alive while outwardly compliant. A person can carry a whole secret world while scrubbing a floor. People in power often underestimate this because they confuse control of labour with control of thought. There is a scholarly uncertainty here that matters. Historians continue to debate how much autonomy enslaved workers could exercise over the pace and organisation of certain tasks, especially in regions where skilled labour or task systems shaped the workday differently. Some rice plantations, for example, operated with labour patterns not identical to gang labour elsewhere. But variation should not be mistaken for ease. Different systems could still be exhausting, coercive, and dangerous. The structure changed, the burden remained. By the time the sky darkens, your body has been translated into service again and again. Hands cracked by soap or soil, back sore from bending, feet swollen in worn shoes or bare against hard ground, eyes tired from smoke, sun, or strain in poor light. The day leaves marks even when no blow is struck. That is part of what life was really like. Obedience did not mean passive stillness. It meant relentless motion on command. It meant learning how to meet the hour already tired. It meant understanding that in 1780 for Black Americans, survival often depended on mastering not just labour itself, but the discipline of moving through every borrowed minute without letting the clock inside your chest entirely become someone else's. You learn very quickly that danger does not always arrive as a shout. Sometimes it arrives as a glance, a pause, a slight change in tone. In 1780 for Black Americans, much of daily life depends on reading small signals before they harden into punishment. This is not a talent anyone would choose to develop, yet it becomes one of the sharpest tools you carry. You study faces the way other people study weather. A lifted eyebrow from a mistress can mean the room was not cleaned to her liking. A master speaking too pleasantly may be worse than anger, because false softness can hide a decision already made. An overseer who says nothing at all may be measuring you in silence, storing up judgment for later. You begin to understand that words are only part of communication in a world built on unequal power. The body speaks first, hands on hips, a jaw set too tight, boots striking the floor more heavily than usual. Even the way a door is opened can tell you whether the next few minutes will be calm or cruel, so you adjust yourself constantly. You lower your gaze, but not too much. You answer quickly, but not so quickly that it sounds sharp. You move with purpose, but not with the kind of confidence that might be mistaken for pride. It is an exhausting balancing act. Every gesture must pass through an invisible filter before it reaches the world. You're not simply living, you are performing safety. Posture matters more than it should. Standing straight can be read as defiance. Slouching can be called laziness. Folding your arms may look disrespectful. Letting them hang too loosely can seem careless. Even walking across a yard becomes a social calculation. Too slow, and someone accuses you of dragging your feet. Too fast, and someone asks why you're in such a hurry. It would be funny if it were not so dangerous. The body becomes a script, and you're expected to deliver every line correctly without ever being given the full text. Eye contact is its own problem. Looking directly at a white person may be seen as insolent. Looking away too fast may seem sneaky. A glance held one moment too long can provoke suspicion. You learn to aim your eyes carefully, somewhere near the mouth, somewhere near the shoulder, somewhere respectful but alert. This sort of knowledge rarely appears in legal records, yet it governs the air people breathe. Social survival often depends on mastering rules that are unwritten, shifting, and deeply unfair. Tone of voice matters just as much. A cheerful answer can be called impertinent if the listener dislikes your face that day. A flat answer can be called sulky. A thoughtful pause may be taken as a hesitation or deceit. Some people develop a light, agreeable voice for public use, one that smooths the edges off every sentence. Others speak very little because silence, though risky, can sometimes be safer than being overheard saying the wrong thing the wrong way. There is no perfect method, only judgment, instinct, and luck. This constant self-monitoring shapes the nerves. You may feel your stomach tighten when footsteps approach from behind. You may begin to listen for mood before language, catching irritation in the scrape of a chair or the force with which a bucket is set down. A child growing up in such a world can become startlingly observant. A young girl may notice that a visitor with polished boots and too many questions means trouble for the household. A boy may understand from a single afternoon that a white man smiling at him is not necessarily a friendly sight. Experience teaches quickly when mistakes are costly. In towns, the social choreography grows even more complicated. Streets are shared spaces, but not equally shared. You may need to step aside on narrow paths, remove your hat, or answer demands from strangers who believe they have the right to question you. A free black person can be treated with suspicion merely for walking confidently through the market. Who do you belong to? Where are your papers? Why are you here? The questions themselves are part of the control. They force you to explain your own presence in a place where your labour may be wanted but your independence is not. Markets, tavern yards, docks, and courthouse steps all bring heavy observation. White people watch black movement for signs of escape, theft, insolence, idleness, or unauthorized gathering. Yet black people are also watching them, reading mood, alliances, and danger with great care. A drunken sailor should be avoided. A constable in a sour temper is trouble. A woman known for accusing servants may not be worth passing too closely. Social space becomes a map of hazards, and you learn it with the precision of someone whose comfort depends on accuracy. There is a curious detail in several descriptions of the era. White observers often commented on what they called the good manners of enslaved servants, praising lowered voices, bowed heads, or soft steps as signs of natural humility. But there was nothing natural about it. Those habits were often the result of pressure, surveillance, and fear. What was labelled courtesy might actually be a shield. Historians still debate how much white households understood this performance as performance. Some probably knew. Others preferred the fantasy that obedience was sincere because that made the whole arrangement feel more comfortable to them. Self-deception can be one of power's favourite luxuries. Clothing also becomes part of the visual judgment. An apron too dirty suggests carelessness. A shirt too neat may provoke comment if someone thinks you look above yourself. Shoes, hats, head wraps, jackets, and even the way fabric is tied can send signals. Some enslaved people receive coarse garments chosen entirely by others. Some free black people try to dress respectably in order to avoid harassment, though respectable dress is no guarantee of safety. Appearance can help, but prejudice is wonderfully inventive when it wants to be. Touch carries meaning too. A pat on the shoulder from a white employer might be presented as friendliness, yet the unequal power beneath it remains unmistakable. A grabbed wrist is correction. A push aside at a doorway is reminder. Even when no open violence occurs, physical contact often serves to mark rank. Your own body can feel less private in such a world. It can be inspected, directed, crowded, or claimed by others in ways that wear down the spirit over time. Children are trained into this physical grammar. They're told where to stand, how to answer, when to stop laughing, how to carry objects, how to enter a room. They learn that running freely may be allowed in one moment and punished in the next, depending on who is watching. A child may be praised for being quiet when that quietness is really caution. Another may be called unruly simply for moving with ordinary energy. These lessons sink into muscle memory long before they can be fully understood. For women, especially maschi, the pressure of being watched can feel relentless. A woman in domestic service may be scrutinized for cleanliness, obedience, expression, and pace all at once. Too much beauty may invite unwanted attention. Too little cheerful submission may invite criticism. She must often appear tireless and harmless, competent but never too confident. It is a narrow path. The social reading of black womanhood in the 18th century is already crowded with stereotypes, and those stereotypes influence how every movement is judged. For men, bodily presentation can be equally fraught, though in different ways. Strength is wanted for labour, yet strength can also be feared. A broad-shouldered man may be valued as a worker and watched as a potential threat. Any sign of anger can be treated as menace. Any sign of intelligence can be read as cunning. He may be pushed to embody usefulness while being denied the dignity normally granted to adult men. The contradiction is constant. Society demands manly labour while refusing manly standing. There are moments, though, when this careful reading creates forms of silent communication within black communities. A quick glance can signal warning. A look toward the road can indicate who is coming. A tightened mouth can tell another person not to speak. A hand briefly pressed to a shoulder can steady someone in distress. In highly controlled spaces, subtlety becomes language. Not all speech needs words. Some of the most important messages travel through posture, breath, and timing. Religious settings reveal the same tensions. In churches where black worshippers are supervised or segregated, the outward performance of humility may be expected and praised, yet inwardly the experience can be very different. A bowed head may conceal grief, anger, prayer, skepticism, or private hope. One person hears a sermon on obedience and feels crushed by it. Another hears the same sermon and quietly holds on to the story of deliverance instead. The face remains composed. The inner life refuses to flatten. A scholarly uncertainty remains around how historians should interpret silence in the archives. When records show obedient behaviour, are they witnessing acceptance, strategy, fear, exhaustion, or some shifting mixture of all four? The answer is often impossible to pin down with certainty. People under domination do not always leave plain explanations for every careful smile or lowered glance. What survives in documents is usually filtered through white observers anyway. That's why historians read against the grain, searching for small traces of motive hidden inside accounts meant to control rather than understand. You can feel all this in the nerves at day's end. The room grows dim, your shoulders drop at last, but only part way. The smell of smoke clings to your hair. Your hands are rough from labour, yet it is not just labour that has tired you. It is the constant management of self, the endless measuring, the need to anticipate another person's reaction before your own body has finished moving. This kind of effort leaves no obvious scar, which may be why it is so easy for outsiders to overlook. But it is real, it accumulates, and still, beneath the caution, personality persists. Someone raises an eyebrow in private mockery. Someone suppresses a laugh at a pompous speech. Someone gives a child a look that says, without words, do not let them make you small inside. These moments matter. They are not grand rebellions. They are smaller and steadier than that. They are ways of keeping the self awake under pressure. So what is life really like here? It is a world where every look can be judged, every movement interpreted, every tone weighed. It is a place where safety often depends on appearing deferential, while your mind works hard behind the mask. You learn to read people because people can hurt you. You learn to control your body because others try to control it first. And through all of this, you remain vividly human, feeling every insult, every danger, every absurd demand, while carrying a private centre that observation alone cannot fully reach. A house can look solid from the outside and still feel uncertain when you live inside it. In 1780, for many black Americans, home is rarely a place of full possession. It is a place you clean, warm, carry, repair, and sleep in. Yet it does not truly belong to you. That fact changes the air. Even comfort becomes cautious. If you are enslaved in a town household, your days may unfold in rooms built for other people's ease. You move through kitchens, entry halls, upstairs chambers, wash yards, dairies, sheds, and narrow servant sleeping spaces tucked behind the visible life of the house. The grand room with polished furniture is not meant for your rest. The bedchamber with curtains and rugs is not yours. The parlour where guests admire the silver is not yours either. Though your hands may have polished every piece, you live close to these spaces while remaining excluded from their meaning. That sort of nearness can sharpen the injustice. You know the household intimately, yet intimacy does not equal belonging. Kitchens are often the true heart of the place, even when polite society pretends otherwise. They are warm, loud, smoky, and demanding. The air smells of yeast, onion, tallow, boiling meat, wet ashes, and scorched milk. Iron pots knock against hooks, knives tap chopping boards, lids rattle, water spits on hot stone. In winter, the kitchen may be the most tolerable room because of the fire. In summer, it can feel like punishment made of heat. You stand near the hearth until your face burns and your back sweats through your shift. Smoke catches in your throat. Grease settles on skin. Yet inside this harsh place, conversation may slip through in fragments. Recipes are shared. Warnings are exchanged. Children linger for warmth. A weary person steals one breath of stillness while dough rises or a pot simmers. Labour fills the room, but so does life. Sleeping spaces tell a different story. Many are cramped, cold, and temporary in feeling even when used for years. A loft over the kitchen may smell of smoke and old wood. A pallet on the floor gathers dust and chill from the boards beneath it. In a detached quarter, several people may crowd together, bodies close for warmth, privacy thin as paper, fabric hangs where doors ought to be, straw mattresses flatten quickly, lice, fleas, dampness, and drafty gaps make themselves unwelcome companions. You learn to sleep with interruptions, a crying infant, a cough that will not settle, rain tapping through a weak patch in the roof, someone entering late after work elsewhere. Deep sleep is a luxury, and luxury has a way of choosing favourites. In the countryside, quarters may stand apart from the main house, though distance does not always bring freedom. A small cabin can offer room for black family life to breathe a little more fully, but it also reveals how little material comfort has been granted. Walls may lean, roofs may leak, mud, brick, or rough plank construction leaves plenty of openings for wind and insects. The smell inside shifts with the season. Damp earth in spring, sweat and stored food in summer, smoke and wool in winter. Everything absorbs everything else. Clothing smells of the hearth. Bedding smells of the room. The room smells of labour carried in on skin and shoes at the end of the day. Still, people make these places into something more than bare shelter. A stool repaired by hand, a gourd hanging on a peg, herbs drying near the door, a rag rug stitched from scraps, a bowl kept carefully because it came from a loved one, a blanket folded with unusual care. Such objects may seem small in an inventory, if they appear at all, but they help create emotional territory within material limits. A place does not need elegance to carry meaning. It needs memory, touch, repeated use, and the wish to protect those inside it. One of the most painful facts about domestic life in 1780 is that privacy can be almost impossible to secure. Your body may rarely be alone. You dress, sleep, work, eat, and grieve within earshot of others. White employers or owners may enter without warning. Children may always be underfoot because there is nowhere else for them to go. Illness happens in full view. Arguments happen in whispers because walls are thin. Affection, too, must be managed carefully. A hand held too openly may attract comment. A mother soothing a child must often do so while continuing another task. Tenderness survives, but it survives under interruption. Women often carry the emotional burden of making unstable places feel livable. They arrange bedding, stretch food, save scraps for later use, mend torn garments, wash infants, tend sickness, and remember who needs what even when no one asks kindly. This work is not decorative. It is structural. A room becomes habitable because someone notices the leaking corner, the empty sack of meal, the child with fever, the shirt that must last another month. Domestic labour builds continuity where law offers none. It is one reason the household can feel both oppressive and intimate at the same time. Men may shape domestic space through repair, building, hauling, and improvisation. A board is fitted into a cracked wall. A stool is strengthened. A latch is fixed. Firewood is stacked just so. A shelf is made from leftover timber. These acts do not grant ownership, but they do create usefulness and dignity. To improve a place you do not own is one of history's bitter little ironies. Yet people do it because daily life must go on. Children need shelter, elders need warmth, supper needs a place to be cooked. Practical care does not wait for justice. Children experience domestic spaces with a mixture of adaptability and alertness. A corner behind a chest becomes a play spot. A doorway becomes a lookout. The underside of a table becomes a hiding place during household tension. They know where crumbs are likely to fall, where the warm patch by the hearth appears in late afternoon, where adults speak softly, where not to wander. A child can map a household with astonishing precision. They can also sense who truly feels safe there. Very often. Not many do. Urban black households that are legally free face different pressures, though hardly easy ones. Renting a room or sharing a crowded dwelling can provide precious independence. But rents are high, wages uncertain, and white scrutiny constant. A free black family may treasure the ability to shut a door, however flimsy, and speak in their own cadence for a while. Yet even that door is insecure if money runs short or hostile officials interfere. Freedom gives shape to home, but economic hardship keeps it fragile. There is a curious and revealing detail from the period. In several northern cities, black residents sometimes took in boarders, shared rooms with extended kin, or built informal networks of mutual aid around domestic spaces that looked unremarkable from the street. A narrow room could hold more than sleeping bodies. It could hold news, childcare, worship, food sharing, and practical support. Historians still debate how visible these arrangements were to white neighbours, because many records notice them only when authorities become suspicious of gatherings. Ordinary black domestic cooperation was often ignored unless someone in power suddenly found it threatening. Apparently, even soup and conversation could become suspicious if the wrong people were doing it. Food anchors home more powerfully than furniture ever could. The smell of a familiar dish can make a rough room feel gentler for a little while. Cornmeal baking, beans simmering, greens cooking down, fish frying in fat, a little molasses sweetening something plain. These scents gather people together and soften the edges of exhaustion. Meals are not always abundant. Often they are not. But the act of eating in company, even briefly, creates a pattern of belonging that no property law can fully erase. A shared bowl can carry more security than a polished dining table, where you are never invited to sit as an equal. Night changes the house again. Public manners loosen slightly once the visible work is done. Voices lower, someone hums while folding cloth, someone braids a child's hair by weak firelight, someone tells a story partly to entertain and partly to steady the mind. In some spaces, an elder recalls a saying from Africa or passes down a family memory with great care. In others, prayer rises softly, almost like breathing. The darkness allows a different kind of speech. Not total freedom, never that, but a gentler register of life. Fear does not disappear at night. Doors can open, orders can come. A person may be summoned suddenly to tend a child, answer a guest, unload a cart, calm an animal, or face accusation. The home remains porous to power. That is the ache underneath everything. Rest exists, but it can be interrupted by someone else's claim on your time and body. Even sleep may feel borrowed. Historians continue to argue over how much cultural continuity from specific African regions shaped the arrangement, decoration, and social use of black domestic spaces in 18th century North America. Some scholars see strong traces in cooking methods, yard use, sleeping patterns, and household organization. Others caution that constant disruption, forced migration, poverty, and regional variation make broad conclusions difficult. The uncertainty matters because it reminds you that home was never built from one single tradition alone. It was built from survival, adaptation, memory, necessity, and whatever scraps of autonomy people could gather. There is also the emotional complexity of serving within white homes while trying to maintain your own domestic life elsewhere. A woman may soothe another person's child all day and then hurry back to comfort her own at night. A man may repair the fence, roof, or furniture of the main house while his family's shelter remains undersupplied. A girl may set out clean linens for guests and return to her own shared bed with one thin blanket. The contrast teaches its lesson without needing words. Yet there is dignity here too. Quiet but unmistakable. In the sweep of a clean floor. In a patched shirt worn again because someone refused to let it fall apart. In a child washed and tucked in despite a punishing day. In a supper made from little. In a room made welcoming with almost nothing. These are not sentimental details. They are evidence of labour turned toward care. So what was home really like? It was not secure in the way the word should mean. It was exposed, crowded, watched, and vulnerable to other people's decisions. But it was also where Black Americans made room for warmth, memory, humour, faith, repair, and tenderness under impossible conditions. A house might not be yours on paper. A room might not be safe for long. Yet within rough walls, beside smoky fires, under leaking roofs and low ceilings, people still built the fragile and stubborn feeling of being together. In a world determined to deny full belonging, that feeling mattered more than ever. Work is everywhere in 1780. It waits in the field before sunrise, in the yard before breakfast, in the alley behind the shop, in the harbour before the fog lifts, in the wash-tub, the stable, the smokehouse, the forge, the dairy, the loom room, the bakery, the brickyard. For Black Americans, work is not just something you do. It is the condition through which other people measure your worth, your obedience, and your right to remain unpunished for one more day. If you are enslaved, your labour can be counted more carefully than your comfort. A person may note how many roos were hoed, how many shirts were washed, how many barrels were rolled, how much timber was cut, how many candles were dipped, how many children were minded, how many horses were fed. The body becomes a unit of output. It is a hard thing to feel your own muscles valued mainly for what they can extract from earth, wood, cloth, fire, and water. Your tiredness is real, but it is rarely the most important fact in the room. Field labour changes with the crop, and each crop has its own demands. Tobacco stains the fingers and drains the soil. Rice work can be wet, mosquito-heavy, and punishing in the heat. Indigo requires careful handling. Wheat and corn bring their own cycles of planting, tending, and harvest. You bend, lift, stoop, cut, tie, carry, and repeat until the motion settles so deeply into your limbs that even rest cannot fully undo them. The earth presses back, mud grips at your feet after rain. Dry dust rises into your nose when the ground hardens. The smell of green stalks, standing water, manure, and sweat stays with you long after the task ends. On large plantations, labour may be organised in gangs, with groups pushed through the day under direct supervision. In other places, especially in some rice-growing regions, task labour shapes the routine differently, with specific assignments expected to be completed before a worker might claim a little time. Historians still argue over how much freedom that extra time actually offered in practice, since the tasks themselves could be severe and the surrounding system remained deeply coercive. A change in labour structure did not make the structure kind. It simply changed the rhythm of exhaustion. In towns and small cities, black labour takes on a different texture. Streets ring with wheels over stone, hammers against metal, hawkers calling goods, dogs barking, coopers pounding hoops around barrels, saws biting through timber, and carts creaking under loads that always seem one crate too high. If you work on a dock, your hands toughen around rope and splintered wood. Tar marks your skin. Salt dries on your cuffs. You learn how to shift weight quickly with another man's movement so the load does not twist and crush a shoulder. At a forge, heat licks your face and sparks scatter like angry stars. In a stable, hay dust catches in your throat and the air smells of leather, horse sweat, oats, and manure. Every trade leaves its own scent on the body. Skilled labour can create a painful contradiction. A black carpenter, blacksmith, cooper, mason, boatman, or seamstress may become essential to a local economy. White families rely on these skills every day. Houses are built, wheels repaired, metal shaped, shoes made, garments cut, bread baked, and boats handled through black knowledge and effort. Yet usefulness does not guarantee respect. In fact, it can invite tighter control. The more money your labour can bring, the more someone may try to manage where you go, how long you work, what you keep, and whom you meet. Skill can make you valuable without making you safe. Some enslaved workers are hired out by owners who collect the wages, or most of them. This practice is especially common in urban areas. It creates a strange appearance of independence. You may move through town, meet customers, handle tools, speak to employers, perhaps even keep a small portion of earnings for food or clothing. But the underlying claim on your labour remains. Your time is still someone else's asset. The thin thread of autonomy can be cut the moment it becomes inconvenient. For free Black Americans, labour is no less central, though its meaning shifts. You can work for wages and keep them, which matters immensely, yet that freedom sits inside a hostile market. White employers may pay less, delay payment, or prefer to hire black workers only for the hardest and dirtiest tasks. A free black washerwoman can spend whole days bent over steaming tubs, lifting soaked cloth that grows heavier by the minute, only to be paid barely enough to cover rent and food. A sailor may find work seasonally, facing storms, injury, and impressment risks. A labourer may spend each dawn searching for a day's employment that might vanish by noon. Freedom in law does not remove precarity from the body. Women's work deserves close attention because it is everywhere and often hidden by the language used to describe it. Household service can sound almost gentle when written in tidy records. The reality is constant motion, scrubbing floors on sore knees, hauling water until shoulders ache, turning laundry and boiling kettles, rendering fat, churning butter, stirring heavy pots, emptying chamber pots, nursing white children while your own wait elsewhere, mending by poor light until your eyes blur. The work is intimate and relentless. It enters every corner of domestic life, which is precisely why it is so easy for people in comfortable rooms to pretend it is natural rather than punishing. Men's labour is often spoken of in terms of strength, but strength itself can become a trap. A strong back means heavier loads. Broad shoulders mean more is stacked upon them. A man known for stamina may be pushed harder, watched more, praised in ways that really mean exploited efficiently. There is very little romance in hard labour when you cannot refuse it, profit from it, or rest properly afterward. The body becomes both your means of survival and the site of constant demand. Children work too, often in ways adults dismiss as light because adults have forgotten how large the world feels when you are small. Carrying water in a bucket that bumps your knees, gathering wood that scratches your arms, minding geese that nip your ankles, picking stones from a field under a hot sky, rocking a baby while trying not to fall asleep yourself. These are not trivial tasks when performed day after day. Childhood narrows under labour, though it does not disappear entirely. A child may still laugh at a chicken darting through a yard or make a game from sorting beans. Play survives in scraps. Work gets the larger share. One revealing detail from the period is how often advertisements and estate records mention black workers by skill. A person is listed as an excellent sawyer, a fine cook, a trained cooper, a capable spinner, a brickmaker, a ferryman, a nurse, a gardener, a woman skilled in dairying. These descriptions were usually written for sale, hire, or inventory, which is grim enough. Yet they also show how much colonial and early American life depended on black expertise. The economy did not merely sit on black labour in the abstract. It ran through specific hands with specific knowledge. That truth can make the revolutionary talk of liberty sound even more hollow. Because while white Americans debated political principle, black Americans were often the ones literally keeping the place standing. Labour also produces social knowledge, on docks, in kitchens, around wells, in workshops, and along roads. Workers hear things, news of troop movements, rumours of British promises, prices of grain, the temper of a judge, the death of an owner, the arrival of a ship, the illness in a household, which merchant cheats, which tavern keeper talks too much. Work sites become channels of information because bodies in motion carry words with them. A person serving food in one room may overhear politics. A driver hauling goods between towns may gather more truth than the men making speeches. Labour extracts energy, yes, but it can also place people near the nervous system of a region. There is danger in that too. Mobility attracts suspicion. An enslaved man travelling with a cart, a free black woman selling goods, a hired worker moving between homes. Each may be stopped, questioned, watched, or accused. The very movement required by labour can be turned against the labourer. You're needed in many places, but welcomed as an equal in none of them. The sensory world of work can be almost unbearable by late day. Soap stings cracked skin. Hemp rope burns the palm. The smell of hot iron clings in the throat. Rice fields hum with insects. Tobacco leaves brush your arms with a sticky film. Wool dust floats in the workroom air. Fish scales glint on wet boards. Flour settles on eyelashes in the bakery. The body collects these details whether it wants to or not. By evening, the senses are full. So are the muscles. So is the patience. Yet there is pride here. Careful and often private. A clean joint in a piece of wood. Bread that rises well. A shirt mended neatly. A barrel sealed tight. A horse calmed by experienced hands. A garden bed coaxed into producing food from difficult soil. Craft matters. Competence matters. People under coercion can still care deeply about doing a thing well, not because the system deserves that excellence, but because excellence belongs to the worker too. Sometimes it is one of the few forms of authorship available. Scholars continue to debate how much room black workers had to negotiate, slow, reshape, or resist labour demands in daily practice without leaving clear traces in the record. Some forms of resistance were open, such as flight or refusal. Others were quieter, hidden inside broken tools, feigned illness, slower pacing, sabotage, strategic incompetence, or the careful redirection of effort toward one's own household when possible. The archive rarely captures these acts cleanly. Power preferred records of discipline, not records of subtly human manoeuvring. Even so, it is clear that labour was never simply accepted in blank silence. People thought, calculated, adapted, and sometimes pushed back in ways that could survive the day. So what was work really like? It was the force that structured nearly every waking hour. It was physical, skilled, repetitive, dangerous, underpaid or unpaid, and endlessly demanded. It built houses, fed towns, loaded ships, raised crops, cared for children, and held together the everyday fabric of a society that rarely admitted how much it relied on black hands. Work could bring knowledge, tiny spaces of movement, and moments of pride, but it could also grind a person down until obedience looked like the only way to make it to nightfall. In 1780, labour was not just what black Americans did. It was the terrain on which survival was fought for, one aching task at a time. Family can be the softest part of life and the most fragile. In 1780, black Americans build bonds under conditions designed to strain, interrupt, and sometimes destroy them. That is the cruel brilliance of slavery and racial control. It does not only claim labour, it reaches into affection, parenthood, loyalty, marriage, and kinship, then reminds you that even love may be judged, priced, or rearranged by someone else. A mother wakes already thinking of others, not in the sweet, polished way later generations might frame it, but in the practical, immediate way of people who know care cannot be postponed. Is the child warm enough? Is there enough food to quiet the morning hunger? Who will watch the youngest while work begins? Is the baby's cough worse? Has the older one learned when to stay silent in the yard? Her thoughts move before her feet do. Often they must. Delay has consequences. A father, whether he lives in the same dwelling or nearby, may carry a different but equally heavy alertness. Can he protect without attracting punishment? Can he provide anything extra through fishing, mending, carving, trading, or small bits of paid work? Can he keep dignity in his voice when his authority over his own family is constantly undercut by white power? A man may love his children fiercely and still know that another person can order them elsewhere. That knowledge sits in the chest like a stone. Children feel family first through touch and routine. A hand guiding them across a yard, a voice humming while clothes are folded, a sibling sharing the last bite, a grandmother rubbing warmth into cold fingers. Kinship is built from repeated acts, and black families in 1780 produced these acts with extraordinary care. Hair is braided, heads are covered, cuts are washed, stories are told at the right time of night, babies are carried on tired hips, older children are warned with a glance before they stumble into danger. Love is practical because practical love keeps people alive, yet the threat of separation hangs over all of it. Sale is the bluntest terror. Debt, inheritance disputes, crop failure, relocation, punishment, and sudden changes in household fortune can split families apart with very little warning. An owner dies, property is inventoried, names become lines on paper. A child can be listed beside livestock, tools, and furniture as if all belong to one cold category. There is almost no insult deeper than that. Yet the records of the time are full of it. Family feeling must live inside a world that treats family members as transferable assets. This threat shapes the way people attach themselves, not by making them love less, but by making every bond carry fear as well as tenderness. A mother kissing her child goodnight may also be wondering whether the child will sleep in the same room next month. A husband walking back from hired labour may fear finding his wife gone to another household. A grandmother teaching a little song may be trying to place something durable in a child's memory, something that can survive even if she cannot remain there to repeat it. Memory becomes inheritance when property cannot be. Marriage exists in complicated forms. Some black couples are recognised informally within their communities but not respected by law. Some are permitted to live together. Some live apart because owners hold them on different properties. A husband may walk miles on a Sunday or late at night for a few hours with his wife, only to leave again before dawn. A woman may hold a relationship together by patience, planning, and emotional endurance that no formal record will ever honour. White authorities may call such unions unstable, while doing nearly everything possible to make them so. It is one of history's more shameless tricks. There is a revealing detail in accounts from the period. White observers sometimes wrote with surprise about the depth of grief shown when enslaved families were separated, as though the existence of such grief were unexpected. The surprise tells you more about the observer than the people being observed. Black families did not need legal recognition from white society to be real. They were real in work shared, meals shared, sorrow shared, names passed down, and children taught to remember who belonged to them. Extended kin often matter as much as parents. Aunts, uncles, cousins, elders, unrelated adults treated as kin, all help form a network of care. When one adult is called away, another watches the child. When food runs low in one room, someone else shares from another. When a woman is ill after childbirth, neighbours or relatives may step in quietly. These networks are not always visible in official records because officials usually cared more about ownership than about relationship. Historians still argue over how closely reconstructed kin systems in North America mirrored specific African patterns, but there is broad agreement that extended family structures became essential for survival. Necessity and memory work together. Children grow up learning that family is precious partly because it is vulnerable. A young boy may know exactly which adults he can run to if trouble starts. A girl may already understand who in the community carries healing knowledge, who tells stories best, who can be trusted with secrets, who remembers birth connections across different farms or town streets. These are not abstract social ties. They are roots of safety. A child learning them is learning the map of belonging. There is joy here too. It would be false to tell this only as sorrow. A baby taking first steps across a rough floor can still make a room break into smiles. A teasing exchange between cousins can still fill the evening with laughter. A couple can still find tenderness in a few quiet minutes together. A father can still feel pride hearing his daughter speak clearly and bravely. A grandmother can still delight in a child who asks too many questions. Joy does not erase the threat around it. It makes that threat more painful because there is more to lose. Names carry family power. A child may be named for a parent, grandparent, or admired elder. Sometimes African naming memory survives in altered form. Sometimes biblical names enter the household through Christian influence. Sometimes nicknames become terms of affection stronger than formal names. Naming can be a claim. It says you belong to someone, come from someone, and are remembered by someone. In a system that tries to reduce people to ownership, family naming pushes in the other direction. It insists on connection. For mothers, one of the harshest burdens is raising children in public vulnerability. They must teach obedience not because obedience is morally beautiful, but because danger is real. Lower your eyes, do not answer back, stay near, come when called. These lessons may sound severe, yet beneath them is terror. A mother is trying to keep a child from harm in a world that punishes black childhood for being too lively, too loud, too curious, or simply too present. Love sometimes sounds like warning. For fathers, there can be a different anguish. The ideals of protection and provision are hard to fulfill when another man can override your every decision. Some fathers resist openly and pay dearly. Others protect through quieter means, teaching skills, modeling restraint, sharing information, making things, finding food, offering steadiness. White society may refuse them patriarchal authority, but within their families their presence can still shape confidence, humour, memory, and survival. Authority imposed from above is not the only kind that matters. Elders are especially valuable. They hold recipes, remedies, stories, prayers, and hard-earned judgment. An older woman may know which herbs soothe fever, which soup stretches furthest, which neighbour can be trusted, which owner is most dangerous when drinking. An older man may remember roads, rivers, old names, and bits of African language long after others have forgotten them. Age can bring frailty, but it also brings a kind of local wisdom that formal power rarely understands. In communities under pressure, memory itself becomes a resource. Wartime makes family life even more unstable. The American Revolution disturbs property, movement, and allegiance. Some black men leave with British forces after promises of freedom. Some are taken into military service in different capacities. Some families gamble on flight together, others are divided by the attempt. A household may wake to find one person gone and spend months with no certain news. Scholars continue to debate how much wartime opportunity truly improved family stability for black Americans overall. Since escape and military movement could both liberate and separate, freedom pursued under fire rarely comes neatly packaged. One quieter feature of family life deserves attention: storytelling. In the evening, after labour has scraped the day nearly bare, people still tell stories. Animal tales, moral tales, Bible stories reshaped through lived experience, remembered family anecdotes, bits of African tradition surviving in altered form, local humour about foolish masters and proud gentlemen. Story gives shape to the world when law gives none. It teaches children how to think, when to laugh, whom to distrust, and how to carry themselves. It keeps the dead present. It turns endurance into something that can be spoken aloud. Touch may be the deepest language of all. A hand resting on a sleeping child, a forehead kissed. Two sisters leaning shoulder to shoulder while shelling peas. An elder smoothing a blanket over tired feet. A husband briefly taking his wife's hand when no one is looking closely. These gestures are small, but they resist the cold logic of ownership. They say this body is not only a labouring body, it is also beloved. So what was family really like for black Americans in 1780? It was loving, inventive, and under siege. It was built through repetition, care, memory, and fierce attachment in a world that constantly threatened to break it apart. Parents taught caution because they loved deeply. Children learned belonging because belonging might be stolen. Couples held one another across distance, fatigue, and legal indifference. Elders passed down what could not safely be written. Family did not exist in spite of danger. It existed within danger, and because of that, every act of care carried unusual weight. In such a world, tenderness was never a small thing. It was one of the bravest things people had. Faith does not arrive in 1780 as a neat answer wrapped in certainty. It comes as a murmur in the dark, a line of song carried under breath, a memory repeated softly so it does not disappear. For black Americans, spiritual life often grows in places where public power cannot fully reach. Not because those places are free of danger, but because the inner world must be protected somehow, and prayer, music, and shared story become ways to keep that world alive. You might hear religion first through white voices, a sermon from a pulpit, a blessing before supper, a stern lecture on obedience delivered by someone who has never once had to obey under threat. Christianity is everywhere in British America and the new United States, but it does not sound the same in every mouth. White ministers may preach humility, order, and submission, then go home to households made comfortable by black labour. Some truly believe they are guiding souls, others seem mainly interested in keeping society tidy. The result, either way, can feel deeply bitter. You stand there listening while sacred words are bent around earthly power, as though the fit were natural. It is not natural. It is a performance of moral confidence that rests on someone else's suffering, and yet faith cannot be understood only through the people who misuse it. Black Americans hear those same biblical stories and find something else in them. Israel in bondage, deliverance through the sea, the proud brought low, the hungry fed, the captive remembered by God. A text offered to enforce obedience can also awaken hope, because stories have a habit of slipping their chains when listeners bring their own lives to them. That is one reason religion becomes so complicated in black communities. It wounds and comforts at the same time. It is used against you, and still it offers language you can claim for yourself. Song carries much of this spiritual life because song can hold more than one meaning at once. A tune sung during work may sound plain enough to outside ears, yet inside it sits longing, sorrow, endurance, memory, and sometimes coded feeling that needs no explanation among those who share it. Voices rise in kitchens, fields, boats, wash yards, and sleeping quarters. Some songs are rhythmic because rhythm helps labour. Some are mournful because grief needs a path. Some are playful because even tired people still crave humour. Some are shaped by African musical habits carried across the Atlantic and transformed under new conditions. Call and response, repetition, layered voices, and strong beat patterns give music a collective quality that can steady a whole room. The sound itself matters. One person begins, perhaps softly, another joins. Then the line comes back changed a little, fuller, warmer, stronger. The room shifts, shoulders loosen, children listen. Someone taps a foot against the floorboards. The fire pops. Smoke moves along the ceiling. For a few minutes the air belongs to the singers more than to the world outside. Song does not remove hardship, but it makes hardship speakable. It gives breath shape. Prayer can be public, but often its deepest forms are private or half-hidden. A woman folding herself over tired knees near the hearth after others have slept. A man standing outside under the cold stars, speaking low so that only God and the trees hear him. A mother placing a hand over her child and whispering protection into the night. Prayer is not always polished language. Often it is simple, urgent, and direct. Keep us safe. Let him return. Spare the child. Give me strength not to speak in anger tomorrow. Let this sorrow pass. Sometimes prayer is less request than endurance made audible. One quirky detail from the 18th century is that some white observers described black worship as overly emotional, noisy, or physically expressive, often with a tone of condescension. They could not seem to decide whether they found such devotion unsettling or fascinating. The criticism reveals a deeper truth. Black spiritual life often engaged the body as well as the mind. Hands clapped, feet moved, voices rose and fell with feeling. Tears came openly. Silence also had power. This was not religion trimmed into polite corners. It was lived with the full human frame, which made many white observers uneasy because controlled bodies were easier for them to imagine than spiritually animated ones. African traditions remain part of this world, though not always in ways easy to trace cleanly. Some people in 1780 were African-born and carried memories of specific cosmologies, ritual habits, proverbs, healing practices, and sacred understandings from West or Central Africa. Others were American-born into communities where these elements had already mixed with Christianity and local custom. A prayer may contain biblical language and older spiritual assumptions side by side. A burial may reflect both Christian hope and African memory. A healing ritual may involve herbs, touch, spoken blessing, and knowledge that does not fit neatly into white categories of religion or medicine. Historians still argue over exactly how much continuity survived from particular African regions. Because forced migration, family separation, and uneven records make certainty difficult. But uncertainty should not be mistaken for absence. The spiritual world was richer than official documents usually admit. Music and faith also help hold community together. A person in grief can be carried by the voices of others. Someone facing possible sale or departure can be prayed over. A child frightened by sickness can be soothed with familiar songs. Elders teach lines, rhythms, and words that younger people absorb almost without noticing. Spiritual life becomes one of the ways people learn who they are, not as property, not as social problem, as souls, kin, and bearers of memory. That is no small thing in a society determined to name you from the outside. There are many kinds of sacred gathering. Some take place in churches where black worshippers are segregated to balconies, side benches, or rear sections, expected to receive the message but not shape it. Some happen outdoors, in yards or near cabins, with less formality and more mutual recognition. Some occur almost accidentally while work is being done. A line of song turning into testimony, a complaint turning into shared prayer. Spiritual life does not always wait for permission or architecture. It grows where people gather with enough trust to let the heart speak. Trust matters because religious language can also be dangerous. A white preacher who emphasizes obedience may simply reinforce domination. An owner who encourages baptism may hope religion will produce submissive workers. Conversion is not always offered in a neutral spirit. Black hearers know this. They listen carefully, taking what nourishes and setting aside what degrades. That selective hearing is itself a kind of spiritual intelligence. Not every holy-sounding voice deserves to be trusted. Women often serve as keepers of this daily sacredness, though formal authority may not recognize it. They lead prayers in ordinary moments. Remember which psalm comforts the sick, teach songs to children, interpret dreams, preserve healing knowledge, and offer counsel when someone is troubled. Their religious work can be quiet, woven through chores and caregiving, but it gives stability to households and communities. A woman stirring a pot may also be speaking wisdom that steadies everyone in the room. Domestic labor and spiritual leadership can sit in the same pair of hands. Men shape spiritual life too, sometimes through formal preaching or exhortation, more often through testimony, song leading, protection of gathering space, and the hard-earned authority that comes from surviving much and still speaking with hope. A man who has seen war, sale, punishment, or the sea may pray differently from one who has not. Others listen because experience has given his words weight. Spiritual status does not always follow legal status. A person denied dignity by the wider world may still become a moral center within the community. Children absorb faith through repetition before doctrine. They hear adults sing in sorrow and in joy. They learn that prayer is what people do when fever rises, when storms come, when someone disappears, when a new baby survives the night, when food is short, when hope must be spoken aloud because nothing visible supports it. A child may not understand theology, but a child understands tone, safety, pleading, gratitude, fear, wonder. Spiritual life enters through the air long before it settles into ideas. There is another layer to all this. Faith is not always peaceful. Some people surely doubt. Some feel anger toward God. Some cannot hear certain scriptures without pain. Some sit through sermons with polite faces while inwardly rejecting every word. Black spiritual life in 1780 is not one simple current of trust. It contains struggle, contradiction, and argument. Scholars continue to debate how far the growth of evangelical Christianity among Black Americans reflected genuine religious attraction, social pressure, strategic adaptation, or some changing blend of all three. The honest answer is that it was probably many things at once. Human hearts are rarely tidy. Storytelling lives alongside song and prayer. In the evening, tales carry moral wisdom, comic relief, memory, and coded reflection on power. Animal trickster stories can delight children while teaching adults how wit survives strength. A foolish proud man in a tale may resemble someone very real, though no names are spoken. A story about escape, reversal, or hidden justice can nourish the imagination without openly inviting punishment. Laughter matters here. Gentle, dry laughter especially, Sometimes humour is the safest way to say that the mighty are not quite as grand as they think they are. The atmosphere of these moments is easy to imagine if you let yourself slow down. Firelight low on the walls, the smell of smoke and cooked greens hanging in the room. A baby asleep against someone's shoulder. Tired feet stretched toward warmth. The rustle of skirts, the creak of boards, the rise of a voice beginning a line everyone else already knows. Outside, wind in the dark. Inside, breath joining breath. Nothing about the legal order has changed, and yet something deeply important is happening. People are becoming more than the names placed on them by power. They are sounding like themselves. This spiritual world does not make suffering beautiful. It gives suffering companions. It makes room for lament without surrendering entirely to despair. It helps people feel the difference between outer obedience and inner worth. That difference is crucial. A person may bow the head in public and still keep a fierce private conviction that God sees more clearly than any master, judge, or merchant. Once that conviction settles in, domination loses some of its claim to define reality. So what were faith, song, and hidden strength really like in 1780? They were shelter made from sound, memory, and shared belief. They were ways of surviving a world that tried to narrow the soul along with the body. They were prayers whispered over sleeping children, melodies carried through labour, stories shaped to preserve dignity, and moments of worship that let people feel human in full. Public life often demanded quiet submission. Spiritual life created another register entirely. In that register, grief could speak, hope could breathe, and the self could remain larger than the chain of commands hanging over the day. Freedom in 1780 is not a clean doorway that opens onto safety. For Black Americans who are legally free, it can feel more like a narrow path along a steep drop, where every step requires proof, caution, and patience. You are not owned, but that does not mean you are trusted. It does not mean you are protected. It certainly does not mean you are left in peace. A free black life may contain pride, movement, wages, household independence, and hard-won dignity. It may also contain constant scrutiny from people who resent the very sight of it. The first burden of freedom is often explanation. Who are you? Where do you belong? Why are you here? A white stranger may ask these questions with the easy confidence of someone who assumes the public world belongs to him by nature. A constable may demand papers. A neighbour may report suspicion simply because you looked too independent while walking down the road. In some places, proof of freedom is a physical object carried anxiously in a pocket, folded into cloth, protected from rain, fire, theft, and loss. A paper can mean the difference between proceeding on your way and being dragged into custody. Imagine living where a misplaced document might let another man debate whether your liberty is real. It is a cruel arrangement, and a terribly fragile one. In northern towns, free black communities are slowly growing, though never without obstacles. You may rent a room, share a house with kin, work for wages, attend church, marry, raise children, and form ties with other free families. These things matter deeply. The ability to choose where to sleep, whom to live beside, and how to spend at least some of your own earnings is no small thing. Yet the larger society keeps reminding you that freedom can be narrowed by law, custom, and racial hostility. Certain trades may be harder to enter, certain neighbourhoods may be watched, certain employers may underpay you while speaking grandly about opportunity. Even simple public confidence can be read as insolence. Freedom must be performed carefully, so it does not alarm those who prefer black dependence. A free black labourer often works in occupations that combine physical strain with social vulnerability. Sailors, cartmen, dock hands, washerwomen, servants, cooks, seamstresses, mariners, stable workers, barbers, chimney sweeps, and day labourers all appear in records of the period. These jobs can offer mobility and earnings, but they also expose workers to unstable wages, injury, weather, and harassment. A free black sailor may know the smell of tar, salt, wet rope, and stale biscuit better than the smell of home. Because work carries him from port to port. He hears news quickly, sees more of the world than many others, and yet may still be stopped on land and made to prove he is not a runaway. A free washerwoman may keep a household alive through endless tubs of steaming linen, her knuckles raw and shoulders aching, only to have a customer delay payment because he assumes she has no power to demand better. Freedom does not end exploitation. It changes its legal shape. For women, legal freedom can bring responsibilities that are both precious and exhausting. A free black woman may head a household, earn income through service or trade, care for children, bargain in markets, and maintain respectability in a world eager to deny it to her. She must be alert to reputation because reputation can affect work, housing, safety, and treatment by authorities. A woman walking alone after dark may be vulnerable to insult or attack. A woman speaking too firmly may be called disorderly. A woman trying to secure payment owed to her may find that the law hears her weakly, if at all. Still, free black women build households, networks, and forms of stability with remarkable strength. Their labour often supports not just immediate family, but wider circles of kin and neighbours. Men face a different but related instability. Legal manhood in the 18th century is usually imagined through independence, property, household authority, and civic standing. Free black men are often denied several of these even when they labour tirelessly. A man may support a family and still be treated like a suspect in the street. He may acquire skill and still be shut out of guilds or favoured contracts. He may speak with intelligence and be read as dangerous precisely because he refuses to seem small. The contradiction bites hard. Society wants the usefulness of his labour without the full dignity of his adulthood. Children in free black households grow up with possibilities that differ from enslaved childhood, but their world is hardly open. They may know the meaning of a locked door that belongs to their family, which is profound. They may also know that outside that door, white children can insult them openly, and white adults may do little to stop it. A child may be told always to answer politely, to stay near known streets, to remember names of trusted adults, to protect important papers if sent on an errand. Freedom enters childhood as both privilege and vigilance. Churches and mutual aid within free black communities become especially important. A church may offer more than worship. It may provide shared information, emotional support, help with burial costs, childcare, temporary lodging, or warning about local danger. Not every town has robust institutions in 1780, and many are still emerging. But community structures matter because the wider society is unreliable. If work is lost, illness strikes, or authorities become hostile, people often survive through one another rather than through any fair public system. Historians still argue over how extensive and organised these networks were in different regions at this date. Since records are uneven and often only notice black cooperation when white officials become nervous about it, even so, it is clear that legal freedom did not produce individual self-sufficiency in some tidy way. Collective support remained essential. One striking detail from the period is the anxiety around kidnapping. Free black people could be seized illegally and sold into slavery, especially in times of disorder or along routes where identity could be easily challenged. The risk was not imaginary in its shaped behaviour. Travelling alone could be dangerous. Trusting the wrong employer could be dangerous. Losing papers could be dangerous. This is one of the harsh truths that makes 18th century freedom feel so precarious. A free person might be forced to live with the knowledge that someone else's greed could try to erase their status in a single violent act. The law might recognise your liberty in theory while failing to protect it in practice. That is not security. It is conditional existence. Public manners therefore become crucial. A free black person may understand how to present calm, modesty, and usefulness in order to reduce friction. This is not simple submission. It is strategy. You speak carefully to merchants. You keep accounts if you can. You dress as respectably as circumstances allow. You cultivate witnesses who know your name and standing. You learn which officials can be approached and which should be avoided. You manage visibility. Too little presence can leave you isolated. Too much confidence can provoke resentment. The balance is exhausting. In port cities especially. Freedom and contact with the Atlantic world bring a wider field of possibility. Sailors carry stories of British lines, Caribbean ports, African coasts, naval service, and places where racial rules differ, though rarely in truly generous ways. News travels fast on ships. So do ideas. A free black mariner may know how local white society compares with what he has seen elsewhere. Such knowledge can sharpen both hope and bitterness. It can also make him more suspect in the eyes of people who distrust any black person who appears worldly, informed, or hard to control. Apparently a man who has seen beyond the next wharf is considered a dangerous ornament. Housing for free black people is often crowded and insecure, especially in towns. Rents are high. Landlords may discriminate or raise prices. Families and boarders share small rooms because sharing makes survival possible. Yet even a cramped dwelling can feel radically different from a place entered under another person's ownership. The smell of your own cooking, the right to arrange bedding as you wish, the chance to shut the door and speak in your own rhythm. These are meaningful freedoms. Small, yes, but not small to the people living them. Work can also produce modest economic advancement for a few. Some free black artisans, sailors, or traders manage to build stable reputations, accumulate tools, or secure more reliable custom. A widow may sustain herself through laundry and food sales. A barber may become known in town. A mariner may return with wages enough to help relatives. These cases should not be exaggerated into easy success stories. The barriers remain severe, but they do show that free black life is not only deprivation, it includes ambition, competence, and social worlds of its own. The emotional burden, though, remains heavy. To be free and still never fully safe creates a strange kind of tension. You know, something precious has been claimed, preserved, or won. You also know it can be challenged any day by insult, violence, or official suspicion. You may feel pride in your household, your earnings, your children's growth, your church ties, your clean coat, your signed paper. And underneath that pride runs a current of alertness. What if the paper is questioned? What if the employer refuses pay? What if the patrol stops you? What if a quarrel with a white neighbour becomes more than a quarrel? This is the mental tax of fragile freedom. Scholars continue to debate how far free black communities in the early republic were able to convert legal status into durable political influence before the 19th century. The evidence suggests pockets of assertion, petitioning, institution building, and collective action, but also severe limits imposed by racism, property requirements, and local law. What is clear is that free status mattered enormously to those who had it, even when the surrounding society worked tirelessly to diminish its meaning. So what was life like for free black Americans in 1780? It was freer than slavery, undeniably and profoundly. It could offer wages, family autonomy, movement, worship, and the dignity of not being owned. Yet it was also shadowed by surveillance, insecurity, legal fragility, and racial hostility at nearly every turn. You could stand upright in law and still be forced to prove your harmlessness over and over again. You could build a life and still know how easily others might try to shake it loose. Freedom existed. It simply did not arrive with peace. For many, it came with papers in the pocket, caution in the voice, and a steady determination to live visibly in a world that kept pretending not to know what to do with a black person who was nobody's property. Hope can be dangerous in 1780. It moves through the air like a rumour, light enough to travel, heavy enough to ruin you if spoken too boldly. For black Americans, whispers of escape, war, and change do not arrive as simple inspiration. They arrive as calculations. A promise of freedom from one side in a war might mean salvation, deception, starvation, disease, or death. A road out of bondage might also be a road away from children, parents, or a spouse left behind. Every hopeful thought must pass through fear before it can become action. The war has made the world less stable, and instability changes everything. Armies move through towns and countryside. Supplies are seized. Livestock disappears. Prices climb. Households become tense. Roads fill with strangers, deserters, soldiers, peddlers, refugees, and men who ask too many questions. In this unsettled landscape, old routines loosen slightly at the edges. That loosening is enough to make possibility imaginable. Not safe, not likely for everyone, but imaginable. British proclamations promising freedom to enslaved people who flee rebel masters have already altered the horizon. The most famous promises began years earlier, but their effects still echo in 1780. News does not travel evenly, yet it travels. A man unloading goods hears it from a sailor. A woman in a kitchen overhears guests discussing runaways. A cart driver picks it up along a road. A child hears adults lower their voices when a certain name is mentioned. The message changes shape as it moves, gaining hope in one mouth and caution in another. Go to the British and you may be free, or you may be used, or you may die of smallpox in a camp, or be carried far from everyone you know. Which version is true? Potentially all of them. That is the trouble. Escape is never only about courage. It is about information, geography, timing, weather, health, family, patrols, and the ability to vanish convincingly enough to reach the next uncertain step. A single person might have better odds moving quietly and fast. A mother with small children faces different calculation entirely. A husband may refuse to flee without his wife. A teenager may choose risk because youth can outrun caution. An older person may know too much about failure to romanticize the road. Historians still argue about how many people seriously considered flight, but decided against it for reasons that left no written trace. Silence in the record can conceal countless private debates. Imagine the practical questions pressing in. Which road is watched least closely? Who might hide you for one night? Do you carry food or travel lighter? Can you trust the ferryman? Can you move by marsh, forest, lane, or shoreline? Will dogs be used? Will a child cry at the wrong moment? What happens if you reach British lines and they move before dawn? This is not the clean drama of a legend. It is mud, hunger, aching feet, insects, wet clothes, and nerves pulled tight enough to hum. And yet people do run. Not because running is easy, but because staying can become unbearable, or because war briefly disrupts the old machinery of control. An enslaved man with knowledge of the roads may seize his chance when a master is absent. A woman hired out in town may slip into a crowd, carrying little but determination, and perhaps one extra garment. A sailor may sign on under another name. A family may attempt escape at night and split apart within hours. Each story is particular. Some succeed for a while and then end in recapture. Some vanish from the record altogether, which may be the happiest possible historical silence. There is a curious detail in many runaway advertisements from the era. Owners often expressed outrage not simply that a person had fled, but that they might attempt to pass as free, acquire forged papers, seek military protection, or rely on networks beyond the owner's control. The language reveals fear. White authority depended on being legible and stable. A person who could step outside that legibility, even briefly, threatened more than property. That person threatened the fantasy that bondage was natural and secure. Apparently one determined woman with a bundle and a good head for directions could trouble the confidence of a whole county. Wartime service offers another uncertain path. Some black men join British forces, attracted by the promise of freedom or simply by the chance to break from a rebel master. Others serve the American side in various roles, sometimes enlisted, sometimes substituted, sometimes labouring without honour or choice. Military service can mean wages, food, movement, and the possibility of changed status. It can also mean exposure, disease, hard discipline, and false promises that dissolve once the immediate need has passed. For black Americans, participation in war is often less about patriotic purity than about choosing among dangerous options in search of the least cruel future. Not everyone seeks escape through physical flight. Some pursue change through petition, negotiation, or the use of revolutionary language itself. In certain northern places, enslaved people and free black communities appeal to courts or legislatures, asking how a land speaking of liberty can justify slavery. These petitions are remarkable not only for their courage, but for their intellectual sharpness. Black Americans clearly understand the political language around them and know exactly where the hypocrisy lies. Whether white authorities answer honestly is another matter. Usually they do not, at least not fully. but the act of petitioning matters because it transforms overheard ideals into claims. Rumour itself becomes a force. News may be wrong, exaggerated, delayed, or confused. A British victory becomes freedom for all by the time it reaches a distant farm. A local skirmish turns into tales of entire counties in revolt. A man said to have escaped successfully may in fact be starving 2 roads away. Yet rumour is not worthless simply because it is unstable. It keeps imagination alive. It pushes people to ask questions, compare stories, and test the edges of the possible. In tightly controlled societies, rumour often does the work that open political discussion is not allowed to do. Women often appear less visibly in the dramatic stories of wartime movement, but that can be misleading. They gather information, hide intentions, prepare food, assess risk to children, negotiate with soldiers, and sometimes flee under conditions far more difficult than those faced by men travelling alone. A woman deciding whether to trust a military promise while carrying a child has to weigh danger with terrifying precision. If she stays, sale or punishment may come. If she leaves, sickness or separation may come. Heroic language rarely captures that kind of choice. It deserves more respect than history usually gives it. Children, too, live inside these rumours of change. They hear adults whispering late at night. They notice who seems restless. They see bundles prepared and then unpacked. They hear distant gunfire or marching, and understand only that grown people are frightened or unusually alert. A child may be told to stay quiet without being told why. That atmosphere alone becomes part of memory. The war enters childhood as unease, secrecy, and the sense that the world could shift by morning. Free black people experience wartime possibility differently, though not necessarily more safely. They may seek work with armies, transport goods, carry messages, or move more widely through conflict zones. They may also face kidnapping, suspicion, impressment, or violence from men in uniform who care little for legal distinctions. A free paper does not always impress a hungry soldier or a panicked patrol. Legal status matters. Chaos matters too. The meeting of the two can be disastrous. Religion and hope often mix in this period. A whispered prayer over a planned escape. A psalm repeated while waiting for news. A belief that divine justice may operate through war, even if war itself remains brutal. Some people interpret the conflict as a sign that the old order can break. Others distrust all earthly powers equally and place hope only in God. Scholars continue to debate how many black Americans embraced the revolutionary language of natural rights as their own, and how many viewed white political struggle with deep skepticism. The answer likely varies by region, status, and personal experience. Some must have listened to patriot speeches with interest. Others surely heard only another set of white men arguing over who got to command whom. There is also the quiet hope of smaller changes. An owner distracted by war may loosen supervision. A town may become busy enough that movement is easier to hide. A hired-out worker may save a little money. A court may hear one petition more favourably than expected. A British officer may honour a promise in one instance, even if the larger system remains unreliable. History often records the dramatic break, but daily life is made of smaller openings too. People notice them. People use them. The atmosphere of 1780 is thick with uncertainty. Roads are muddy with passage. Taverns buzz with argument. Fields still need tending while armies consume the harvest. Smoke from distant burning may or may not mean battle. Sailors carry contradictory reports. Merchants grumble. Owners become more watchful because they know the ground beneath them is less firm. Black Americans read this atmosphere carefully. When power looks anxious, possibility sometimes widens. Still, hope can wound. A failed escape brings punishment. A false promise of emancipation leads to greater loss. A family divided by different choices may never reunite. The war that seems to open one door can close 3 others. No honest telling of this period should turn rumour into miracle, but neither should it ignore the emotional force of possibility. To imagine another life while living under domination is itself significant. It changes the posture of the mind, even when the body remains constrained. So what were rumours of escape and change really like for black Americans in 1780? They were electrifying. frightening and deeply practical all at once. They spread through docks, kitchens, camps, quarters, roads, and churchyards, carrying scraps of news that could alter a person's sense of the future overnight. They offered paths out, but never clean ones. They forced impossible choices about family, risk, trust, and survival. In a world built to keep black life obedient and enclosed, rumour became more than gossip. It became a map drawn in whispers, a fragile guide to what might yet be possible if the moment, the road, and the courage all aligned. By 1780, you understand that contradiction is not an occasional feature of black life in America. It is the air itself. The land speaks of liberty with extraordinary confidence while asking black people to survive through caution, restraint, and visible obedience. Fine words rise from courtrooms, pulpits, and dining tables. Meanwhile, real life happens in kitchens thick with smoke, on roads watched by patrols, in fields that do not care about political philosophy, and in crowded sleeping spaces where tired bodies still try to protect a spark of personhood. The contradiction is not hidden, it is everywhere. What takes time is realizing how completely it shapes the soul. You see it in the law. Some places move hesitantly toward limiting slavery. Others tighten old rules. A black person may be free in one town and treated as suspect in the next. One court may hear a petition seriously. Another may ignore it. One minister may preach the brotherhood of souls. Another may preach obedience with suspicious enthusiasm. This patchwork is its own kind of burden. Inconsistency can be as exhausting as open cruelty because it forces constant recalculation. There is no single rule book, only a shifting landscape of danger. You also see contradiction in white households. A woman may depend on black labour for nearly every comfort of her day, then speak as though the labourer is naturally suited to service. A man may praise independence while ordering another human being about as if issuing commands were a form of virtue. A family may trust a black nurse with a sick child, a black cook with their meals, a black driver with their goods, and a black carpenter with their roof, yet still deny those same people honesty, autonomy, and equal standing. Dependence and contempt live side by side. That is one of the ugliest structures in the whole society. For black Americans, survival often means learning to navigate this contradiction without being crushed by it. Outward obedience can become a method, not a confession. You nod, you answer, you carry. You step aside when required, you read the room, you keep your own counsel. To outsiders, such actions may look like surrender. Very often they are strategy. Historians still argue over how best to interpret compliance in the archive, because documents made by the powerful rarely record the interior life of the people beneath them. What looks like submission may contain calculation, caution, grief, contempt, endurance, or all of them woven together. Human beings are rarely legible to their oppressors. This is one reason dignity matters so much. Not dignity as a grand speech or dramatic pose, but dignity in ordinary insistence, a clean garment carefully mended, a child corrected with patience instead of rage, a room swept though no one else values it, a prayer whispered over a sleeping face, a joke shared in low tones after a long day, a spoon saved, a name remembered. These acts seem small only to people who have never had the larger protections of life stripped away. In a world bent on reducing black existence to labour and compliance, ordinary dignity becomes an unspoken declaration. You are more than the role imposed upon you. Endurance has its own texture. It is not always noble. Sometimes it is simply tired. Sometimes it is irritable, hungry, sore, and quietly furious. Sometimes it looks like waking up again when nothing about the day deserves your trust. There is a temptation in later storytelling to make endurance look graceful all the time. Real endurance is often rougher than that. It includes fear, resentment, compromise, and moments of hopelessness. Yet it continues. That continuation matters. A person gets up. A family stays connected. A song is remembered. A child is taught. A warning is passed along. Life moves forward, stubbornly, even when justice does not. There is also endurance of memory. Black Americans in 1780 do not live as blank figures dropped into an American landscape without a past. Some remember African places directly. Others carry fragments through language, rhythm, food ways, burial customs, kin practice, healing knowledge, and habits of storytelling. Even when origins are broken by sale and forced migration, memory persists in altered form. Historians continue to debate how much continuity can be proven in specific cases, because the evidence is often partial and filtered, but the presence of memory is unmistakable. People do not become empty simply because power wishes them to. They adapt, they blend, they retain what they can. You see this in the making of community. A woman sends food to a sick neighbour, a man shares news from the docks, an elder names a danger before others see it. Young people carry messages, laughter, and fresh eyes into tired rooms. Community is not sentimental. It is practical and emotional at once. It helps people survive the ordinary abrasions of the day and the extraordinary shocks of sale, war, illness, and loss. It is also fragile. One departure, one death, one forced move, one accusation can tear a hole through it. That fragility makes people hold one another more tightly when they can. There is a revealing little pattern in the records of the period. White observers often noticed black behaviour most clearly when it disrupted expectations, when someone ran away, petitioned, preached boldly, dressed well, spoke sharply, or resisted openly. Ordinary steadiness received less attention, but ordinary steadiness may be the most impressive thing of all. To maintain family feeling, practical intelligence, spiritual life, and self-respect under continuous pressure is no small feat. It is not dramatic enough for many archives, yet it is central to understanding what life was really like. The emotional world of 1780 is especially complex. Fear is constant, but it does not stand alone. So does pride, so does humour, so does longing, so does boredom, which history books are often too elegant to mention. Even under oppression, people still feel the dull drag of repeated chores, the annoyance of a foolish neighbour, the embarrassment of a clumsy moment, the pleasure of a good meal, the thrill of hearing unexpected news, the relief of warm sunlight after cold rain. This matters because oppression does not erase the ordinary range of human feeling. It distorts life, but life remains recognisably human within the distortion. For those who are free, contradiction takes another form. Freedom is real and precious, yet the surrounding world often treats it like a problem to be managed. A free black household may carry itself with discipline and pride, while knowing the law may not protect it fully. A free black sailor may traverse oceans and still be challenged in his own port. A free black woman may build a home through exhausting work and still face daily insult. Freedom exists, but it is asked to justify itself endlessly. That demand wears on the spirit. For those who are enslaved, the contradiction can be even sharper. You are told to obey within a society claiming to have thrown off tyranny. You are asked to respect institutions that deny your humanity. You are expected to preserve order in households founded on disorder at the deepest moral level. The absurdity is obvious. So is the danger of saying so aloud. That is why so much truth circulates quietly, through side glances, stories, songs, memory, and the subtle intelligence of people who know exactly what kind of world they are living in. Wartime adds another layer, opportunity appears, then vanishes. Rumour widens possibility, then leaves heartbreak. Some find a road out, others do not. The age is unsettled enough to make change imaginable, but not stable enough to make it safe. That unsettled feeling shapes the future, once people have seen that the old order can shake, even briefly. It becomes harder for that order to present itself as eternal. The ground has moved. Minds move with it. In the end, the deepest truth may be this. Survival meant obedience on the surface because the surface was dangerous, but surface was never the whole person. Underneath it lived judgment, memory, skill, love, faith, irritation, wit, desire, and 1,000 private refusals to become exactly what the world demanded. Some refusals were loud, many were quiet. Both mattered. The quiet ones especially sustained daily life. A person could not openly rebel every hour. A person could, however, preserve an inner measure of self that power never fully possessed. So when you ask what life was really like for Black Americans in 1780, the answer is not only suffering. Though suffering was real and often severe, it is also discipline, adaptation, closeness, fear, strategy, labour, tenderness, and the stubborn maintenance of humanity inside a nation that praised freedom while withholding it. It is the feel of rough cloth on tired skin, the smell of smoke in a low room, the sound of a careful voice answering politely while thinking far more than it can safely say. It is a hand reaching for a child in the dark. It is a song travelling softly through evening air. It is a people living under contradiction without letting contradiction fully define the truth of who they are. Now the night grows quieter around you, and the harsh outlines of the day begin to soften. The fields, kitchens, docks, roads, and crowded rooms drift gently into shadow. Voices that once had to stay careful can rest at last in the hush of evening. You let the weight of those lives settle not as noise, but as a slow understanding. Beneath every demand for obedience, there remained a private world of thought, memory, love, and endurance. Beneath every public performance of caution, there lived a steady human presence that no law could fully own. So you breathe a little more slowly now. You picture the dim glow of firelight, the low murmur of prayer, the soft rustle of cloth, the sound of someone humming almost too quietly to hear. History, at its most honest, is not only made of battles and speeches, it is made of tired hands, watchful eyes, shared meals, and hearts that kept beating through impossible days. And as the darkness deepens, you let that truth become gentler, calmer, quieter, until it rests like warm dusk over the past, and over you,